Hi, welcome to day 7 of Disney Plus movie reviews. Today I am talking about the movie Amy. I'd never heard of this movie before. It's really, really, really good. It is so good that I'm not going to summarize it at the beginning. Well, I'm going to tell you a couple of things. And then I'm going to be very generic though. I'm going to tell you our reviews. And then I'm going to say, if you haven't watched this movie, please go watch it and then come watch the rest of this review. So, this movie came out in 1981. It was set earlier in the 1900s. According to IMDb and the American Film Institute's website, this movie was originally a made-for-TV movie, but it was so powerful that they released it to theaters instead. I agree. It was really good. The AFI catalog has lots of interesting background information about the casting of this movie, with the exception of the character Melvin, he's a student at the school, eventually. All the other deaf students in the film were students at the California School for the Deaf in Riverside, California. They did that so that the movie would feel more authentic. And it does. It feels very authentic. Walt Disney was the first major studio to plan to caption their films for those who are hearing impaired, according to AFI. And they released this film captioned in 10 different cities. Good plan, because it is a lot of kids who are deaf in this movie, so it makes sense that kids would want to see themselves on screen and understand what was happening. It was a really good movie. It is a drama / maybe an indie film. Also, there's a character in this movie named Henry. He's a student. I love Henry. He, different than my love for Griffin, but no less great. He's a great kid. He is not listed as a starring person on IMDb or on AFI, and that was shocking and felt like a betrayal. So, movie starts, and there's just a song, and this lady who you assume is Amy, and you are correct, is in her house, and then she leaves a note for her husband because she's leaving him. She leaves her wedding band, and the song says Amy a lot. I'm assuming the song was written for the movie. I don't actually know, but it says a lot. She goes to this school for deaf and blind students to be a teacher. She meets with the superintendent, Mr. Ferguson. He takes her around, and we meet Henry really fast. You see, the deaf kids and the blind kids don't hang out with each other. They're separate groups. And with the exception of Henry. Henry is deaf, but he will also play with the blind kids, and he will protect them too. There's 2 kids who are deaf who walk up behind these 2 blind kids who are walking, and they push one of them. And there's a kid that I refer to as Punk Kid. I don't know his name. He's got dark black hair, really pale. I don't like him. So he gets down on the ground in front of the blind kid while another kid pushes him. So he falls over him, and Henry sees it and runs over there and shoves one of the kids. And then their teacher is like, Henry, don't do that. Takes the other kid away to the infirmary, I guess, because he was hurt. So then you meet Henry. Love Henry. He's a little cutie. And Henry asks what Amy's name is in sign language because he's deaf. He uses sign language to communicate. And Amy's like, oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak sign language. But then she takes his hand and spells her name into his hand. And he smiles because she's interacting. He's happy. So her name is Amy. And he's like, we should go get your name sign because there's a teacher who works in the wood shop. I don't know that that's the right word. He does woodworking stuff. There we go. Sorry. He does wood stuff. So they're like, let's go get your name. So that guy, I think his name was Owen, gives Amy the name sign of, it's the sign language A on the lips because she has come to teach the deaf kids how to speak. So her name sign is A on the lips. And Henry says that, in sign language, says that might be her official name sign, but to him, she'll always be A pretty, which was cute. Odd, because he's hitting on his teacher. But apparently he's young enough that it's just sweet. It's not weird. So So we meet Henry. Movie happens. It's really good. I'm so proud of all of them. Amy teaches. I'm not going to give you more spoilers because that was just the intro, and I want you to see this movie. There are some sad moments, so know that. There's a love story. There's some people standing up to people. There's some more, little bit of fighting with a tragic, tragic ending. Don't look up spoilers, just watch the movie. It's really good. We get a couple new students. We play some games. You should watch this movie. There's a character named Ben. He's a doctor. You meet him pretty early in the movie. Stuff happens. He comes back. He's also in the cover photo of the movie on Disney Plus, so you'll see that if you open it. That's Ben. He says to her, "Everything costs something, Amy, but only you can know if it's worth it." Good and impactful. I wrote the quote down because I really like quotes. I'm not going to tell you more quotes until after I tell you our review. So Daniel gave it a 7.5. That punk kid from the beginning of the movie's motivations were not clear. There were some particular scenes that were funny that I'll tell you about later. It had believable character development, which was really cool, and believable characters. Like the punk kid was believable. I just don't know what his motivations were, said Daniel. I gave this movie a 9, and honestly, I didn't give it a 10 just because it made me sad at parts, but it was so good, and I just love it. It's just sad parts made me really sad. I really don't like the punk kid. The plot was a 10, and the characters were a 9.5 just because of that punk kid. I just really don't like it. I would definitely watch this movie again. So I watched this movie actually like 2 nights ago. But there was a part that I look up this morning to make sure that I remembered it right. And I kept watching for like 5 more minutes because it was so good. So it's called Amy. It's on Disney Plus. Came out in 1981. If you don't have Disney Plus, I'm sorry. You're watching a lot of reviews about Disney Plus. But it's really good. So please go watch the movie. It's amazing. This is where if you don't want to hear any more spoilers, you should stop watching now. Cool. Okay, so back to the beginning. I'm going to tell you some highlights and lowlights of this movie. There is a cute little boy. He's like the youngest student in the school. He's almost 5. It's like a week or 2 weeks from his birthday. When you meet him, he's like, yeah, Mr. Whoever, who's his doll that he carries around, says that my eyes will open when I turn 5. Because when he was at home, they had some puppies, and when the puppies were born, their eyes were closed and then their eyes open. So he thinks that everyone is born with their eyes closed. And when you turn 5, they open. And this kid gets influenza and dies right before his 5th birthday. And Amy like loses it. Because it's really sad. It's so sad. And you find out that Amy had a kid who was deaf, and she would take him to a local school from where she lived with her husband. His name is Elliot. Not a huge fan of him either. They were married for 10 years. So she would take him to that school for every day for like 2 years. And then her husband and the doctor decided to send her child away to like an institution. And then shortly thereafter, he died. And she did not handle that well. And her husband, and she never had any more kids because her husband said that she was not capable of having normal kids. Super rude. They found out when their kid was 2 that he was deaf, and Amy said that she thinks she loved him more after that. Amy's a great mom. Like, she's on board with whatever comes her way. It's just the dad who's not so great. I actually didn't take notes for the whole first half of this movie because I was so engaged with it. It's really, really good. They play football. There's a student who comes to the school partway through the movie. His name is Melvin. His dad brings him. They live out on farm. The kid has never been anywhere, and the dad brings him to the school. He is a big dude. Melvin's a big dude, tall, not like huge, but sturdy. He's a sturdy individual. He's 19. deaf, can't speak, doesn't know sign language, because how would he have learned it? So interacting, difficult for him. And the superintendent, Mr. Ferguson, is like, we don't take students over 16. We've never had it. Like, I'm sorry, we can't. And the dad's like, oh, Melvin would never hurt anybody. He knows not to touch kids younger than him. A great policy. And finally, Mr. Ferguson's like, yeah, okay. One of the teachers is like, Mr. Ferguson, we don't take students that old. And he was like, no, but I couldn't turn him away. And Melvin's so sweet. Melvin. I've been saying his name wrong this whole time. His name is Mervin, and I kept doing that through the movie too. Sorry, Mervin. His name is Mervin. He's big. He's great. They start playing football because they're out on a picnic one day. Ben, the doctor, comes and is like, Amy, let's go on a picnic after church. And she's like, I'm in charge of the kids. And he's like, I know. I brought enough food for all of us, because he likes Amy. And Amy's like, no, I'm still married. And he's like, I mean, she did leave her husband, but like, he just doesn't care. So Henry sees the village boys playing football, and he's into it. And the village boys are not very nice to him. So they, Ben, the doctor, and the teacher, whose name I do not know, like not Ferguson, but there's a male teacher, the one who took away that kid at the beginning to the infirmary, who's a nice dude. He speaks ASL. I don't know if you say speaks. He knows ASL. He uses it. He talks to the kids, and he speaks, and he hears. So he translates for Ben while they learn football. So then Mr. Ferguson challenges the village football team to a football game. And the village school man is like, no, you know that our kids don't interact with your kids. And he's like, our kids are normal. They just can't hear. It's fine. Like, you don't have anything to lose, because he's like, oh, my kids will beat your kids. We'll crush you. And they're like, Amy's like, well, then it's fine. Amy's kids win. I'm so proud of them. It's like, we're losing, but like the other team only scored 2 touchdowns and we had 1. And then it's the last quarter. And Mervin likes to bring the ball to Amy because he knows Amy and he doesn't really know what's going on, which is fun. Like, he didn't learn how to interact, speak, communicate with people until he was 19. So like, I think he's doing pretty well. There's also a fun like learning football montage. It's funny. Mervin carries a kid on his shoulders and he just runs through everybody. So in the game, Mervin takes the ball to Amy. And so Ben is like, I have a great idea. And he sends Amy to the end of the field. So he stands behind the goal. She stands behind the goal. So when Mervin gets the ball, he runs straight down the field to Amy and scores a touchdown. And then Henry is our little punter kicker guy. And he had tried earlier, but he missed. But now the game is tied. It's 12-12. And he gets the point. So it's 12-14 and we win. And it's a great moment. And honestly, even if they hadn't won, would have been great. They got to be included in society and do something fun, but they won. It was good. It was a good time. Ben and Amy have a date. They go on a date. Like, she goes to his house for dinner. He makes it for her. And she will get kind of close to him, but then when she realizes they're getting emotionally close, she pushes away, which I get where she's coming from. Like, she just left her husband of 10 years. It's understandable. And she's like, no, I'm married. It's wrong. And he says, the only thing that's wrong is to deny how we feel. Debatable, but a nice sentiment. Earlier in the movie, Amy has been teaching the kids how to speak, and she takes them out to fly a kite and is trying to teach them the word kite with the sounds and is showing them what a kite does. Not quite sure why we do that, but it was fun. It was a good scene. That's before Ben and Amy are actually close. And so he helps her fly the kite, and she's like, please go away, which is a little rude. But our intro to him was he showed up to save a kid. Like they got the doctor when he was drunk. So I can see why she's not really into him at first. It was not very professional, but he turned it around real fast. He could have just started that way. And then the kite gets stuck in a tree. And then Henry learns how to say the word kite. It's so exciting. Henry is very motivated. Henry gets a letter from his parents that say that they're coming to visit. And Henry's like pumped. And like, why wouldn't you be? Your parents are coming. But Amy's like, have his parents never come before? And one of the other teachers is like, no, they've never had the money to. So Henry points to the letter, to the word mother. And Amy figures out, like they communicate, and figures out that he wants to learn to say the word mother. And so they work really, really hard. And he can say the word mother. So Henry's parents come. And like they take Henry out of class to go see his parents, out of Amy's class. And Henry is in the hall with a teacher. Her name is Miss Malvina, I think. She starts out as a snot, but she redeems herself at the end. She's just, she loves those kids and she doesn't want Amy to like get their hopes up, I think. But Amy knows she can teach them how to speak. Fun fact that I read on the internet, either IMDb or AFI, the actress who plays Malvina died at 97. She lived for a really long time. She passed away in like 2 or 3 years ago, not very long ago. But she had hearing loss. So I bet this movie was a lot more personal for her. She was a good actress. Didn't like her character at first because she was playing her well. So she's the one who's taking Henry up to see his parents. And then he tries to turn and go back to Amy. But then she figures out like, well, they communicate. And Henry wants Malvina to say mother and like feel the vibrations of her face to make sure that he's ready to say it for his mom. So you go into the room with his parents. It's like his parents. And I think Ferguson was in there, the superintendent, and Malvina because she brought Henry in. And his mom is sitting in a chair, just kind of staring into the distance. And then the dad is standing behind the mom. And so at first I was like, man, they are not excited about seeing their child. And their child is so cool. Why are they not excited? And then Henry walks over to her and says, mother. And she starts like freaking out. And it's like, Henry, is that my Henry? Because she's blind. So she couldn't see him and Henry can't hear her. So they didn't have a way to communicate. And now they do. It was so good. So they go get Amy and have her come in to see like what it has done. And it's just, it was a wonderful, wonderful time. Ferguson is in a board meeting with the board, and they're like, we've given you all this money. I don't think you should be experimenting with programs. Like, it's clearly not working. These kids aren't learning how to speak, blah, 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 blah. And they call it an asylum. And Ferguson is like, it's a school, not an asylum. And he's really passionate about letting the kids be normal. And I'm really proud of him. Because he's like, we don't even have a doctor on site. That's not reasonable. We have to like beg for things that other schools are handed to them. And they're like, you're not a normal school. And he's like, yes, we are. They just can't see or hear. Everything else about them is normal. And the board guy calls them your people, which is super rude. And he's like, everyone knows that the deaf cannot speak. But Amy brings Henry in because they've been sitting outside. She's been listening. And they're like, you can't be in here. And she's like, Henry, say your name. And he won't. And then that's when the guy's like, everyone knows that the deaf cannot speak. And Amy's been teaching the kids how to read lips too. And so Henry says, yes, I can. We need your help, please. And the board member, who I'm assuming was the board president, just sat down. It was so good. Remember that tall kid, Mervin, who I was saying his name wrong earlier? Mervin, 19. So in Amy's class, where she's teaching them to speak, I think the punk kid drew the picture. I don't think he just passed. I think he drew it. It was a picture of a monkey kind of dressed in Mervin's clothes maybe, but it was labeled Mervin. And Punk Kid passed it to this cute little blonde girl who passes it to Henry, which was a weird call because you know that Henry's not into that. So Henry sees it and he immediately jumps up and starts fighting the Punk Kid. And Amy's like, no. So then he goes over to Mervin and he does the ASL sign for friend, which is like you hook your fingers together and then you switch them over like this. Right. So he does that. And then Mervin pulls a cookie out of his pocket that's wrapped in a handkerchief and gives it to him. That was fun. Ben is going to teach Amy to drive. That's a funny scene. And then she drives through a fence. And then he turns around. He's like, I have something to tell you. And he turns around. So he's yelling down the road away from Amy. And he yells, I love you, Amy Medford. And then he turns back around and she's gone. It was funny. So he looks for her. And then she pops out from behind a tree and says, I love you too, Ben Cochran. And it's cute. Then Ferguson, the superintendent, gets a letter from a detective agency because Amy's husband has been looking for her this whole time because he views her as a possession, not as a spouse. Not okay. So Ferguson, Amy didn't tell Ferguson that she used to be married or is married technically. So now Ferguson knows that she's married to her in a way, and he's like, school can't afford a scandal. And she's like, my husband viewed me as a possession, quote, a useless ornament. And he wanted me that way because it made him feel like more of a man, end quote. That's a pretty terrible marriage. So she leaves. She's like, I'm out. Can't do this. They're decorating for Christmas and because Christmas is very soon. And so put out the Christmas tree and they don't have the ornament for the top of the tree, the angel. So this lady who works there, I think her name is Hazel. She only comes up a couple times, but she's listed as a person who's starring in the movie. Anyway, not better. I am. I think Hazel is like, do you want me to go get it, Amy? And Amy's like, no, it's fine, I will. So she goes to the storage room and she gets the angel out and then she shifts it and then she drops the angel and it breaks. And so Amy is sitting there just like sad, crying. There's a character named Just George. We meet Just George like pretty early in the movie. I think he's one of the kids that Punk Kid kind of attacked at the beginning because he's a blonde kid. Just George is a little cutie. He has a best friend that he always walks around with whose name I actually do not know because Just George was a name that stood out. And he tells you why he's named that. Well, he tells Amy it's equal parts sad and sweet. So Just George hears Amy being sad. So he goes in there and is like, don't be sad. Soon it's going to be Christmas. Earlier in the movie, when we met Ben, the doctor, there was a kid whose stomach hurt a lot. Amy took him to the nurse and the nurse was like, no, we don't have a doctor. So that's how we found that out. And why Ben came, turns out that the kid had like snuck into the kitchen and eaten too many green apples. And apparently eating a lot of green apples will make your stomach hurt. But his best friend, Just George, came with him. And Amy told them a story about a ruler man who had to wear an eye patch until he did a good deed and then he could take it off and it made him become kind. And then all the people in his kingdom also started doing that, wearing an eye patch until they became kind. And so Just George and his best friend are walking around wearing an eye patch on their ear. And Amy's like, why are you doing that? They're like, we're doing it until we do a good deed. So, and that was like at the beginning, near the beginning of the movie. So Just George is still wearing his eye patch on his ear because they're like, well, we can't see. So now we're wearing it on our ears instead. Clever. But now they're losing a lot of senses. But like you can still hear through it. So anyway, Amy's like, why are you still wearing your eye patch? And he's like, well, I haven't found a good deed to do. And she's like, yes, you did. Feel that. And she put his hand on her mouth and he's like, you're smiling. And she's like, not just anybody can give someone a smile. You can take that ear patch off. She takes him off. He's called Just George because he was left in an orphanage when he was small. And he wasn't named. Man, I took a lot of notes. I didn't start until the end of the movie, but I took a lot of notes. Well, like halfway through. Because there was just so much good stuff. I'm sorry this video is long, but also I'm not because this movie's so good. So they name him George. So he just goes by George. And then somebody's like, well, you got to have a last name. What is it? And he's like, I ain't got no last name. I didn't come with no last name. I'm just George. And so now he's just George. So that kid, super punk from earlier, I really don't like him. So it's Christmas. And they're like doing their Christmas singing and whatnot. Oh, he was so rude. So they had these little like Santa bags. I don't know if they were heavy bags or if they were like filled with rocks or what they were. But when there weren't teachers looking, he grabbed the hard little Santa bags and threw them at Mervin. And I don't know why he doesn't. Well, he's just a little punk. He just doesn't like people, I guess. He wants to, maybe it's because he feels weak. But you could just make friends and that would work better. So Henry tackles him and punches him in the face. Ben comes dressed as Santa because it's Christmas in Australia. He says, and the end of it is, yet all this glory pales and cannot stand before the radiant magic of your smile. I'm assuming he wrote it. He might not have. And then the kids who are deaf, Amy taught them. So they say, they take turns. So each one has a word. So it's A, Merry Christmas to every standing out there. And Mervin pulls out a wooden snake that he had made for Henry. And you saw Mervin working on something earlier. Turns out it was a gift for Henry. And so Henry gets it and smiles, and then Turd Kid grabs it, throws it on the ground, and then kneels down and squishes it with his knee. So he breaks it in two places. And then Mervin grabs him and throws him to the ground by hitting him in the back of the head. So the kid falls down into chairs. Mervin is a big, strong dude, and he doesn't realize how big and strong he is. But he's pretty big and strong. So then they like run over there, and Ben takes off the Santa, at least the hat and the beard, flips the kid over, and he has a blood trickle out of his mouth and his nose. And Mervin sees it, and he runs away, and Henry runs after him, and then we see a car pull up. It's Amy's husband, and Malvina, the lady, lies and says that nobody by the name of Amy Medford is there. So, like, she's turned it around. She's trying to help Amy because she realizes Amy actually does care about the kids. But then Amy comes up to ask Malvina something, and the husband sees him. And so, quote time, she says, my life just has nothing to do with you now. He says, Amy, I can give you anything you want. She's like, I have my work, I have my friends, and the children who need me. He says, you've met another man. True, but not the point. She says, it has nothing to do with a man. It has to do with what I want to do with my life. It has to do with feeling worthwhile. Important. Elliot says he can change, but like it's been 10 years. And she says, it doesn't matter. He says, we can have another child. No. And then they just realized that Henry ran off. Like, I guess they knew Mervin had, but I don't know why they weren't worried about that. They're like, Mervin will probably try to go home. He lives near the railroad tracks or on the other side. There's a railroad involved. I had looked up something about this movie and saw that a kid gets run over by a train. And so as soon as they said, well, actually, as soon as they ran away, I was like, no! So they're running, and they're running down the railroad tracks. And Mervin's running, and then Henry can't see him, but also they can't hear each other. And it's dark. And so Henry's running, and Henry falls down. And I was really, really afraid that Henry was going to fall down and get stuck on the railroad tracks and get run over. That is not what happens. When Henry falls down, he feels the vibrations in the track and looks behind him, sees the train coming, jumps off right before the train gets there. Mervin is not that lucky. This is the part that made me really, really sad. This is why I didn't give this movie a 10, because it was so good. Like, I'm not mad that they put heartfelt, heart-wrenching things in it. It just was so sad. Mervin is running down the track. Run, 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 run. And then he sees the light coming. He turns around. He sees the light. He goes, and then the train. And that is the last you see of Mervyn. So they find Mervyn. Well, they find Henry and Mervyn. And it was just so sad. They bring Mervyn's parents to see him at night by the tracks, which seems really sad. But they do. They bring him. It's his mom and his dad. And his mom is like, we never should have sent him to that school. They couldn't teach him nothing. Blah, 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 blah. And then Henry goes over there and is like, oh, also the dad like looked under the blanket. So he saw his kid. I don't remember I think mom looked too, but I'm not sure. So Henry like points at Melvin. Oh my gosh. Henry points at Mervyn and is like, friend, my friend. And then he says a lot more words. He's like, this is my name. This is where I go to school. And the mom is like, is he one of yours? They're like, yeah, we taught him. And so then the mom gets a kid out of the car. She's like 6-ish. It's her baby, Pearl, who's deaf, from their car. And she wants Amy to teach her how to talk. So she just sends her to the school. Like she just goes back with them in the car. Also, earlier when we met Mervyn, the dad didn't say goodbye to Mervyn. And I thought that was going to be a problem, but it wasn't. So that's cool. He handled it well, but also sad because he never got to say bye to his kid when his kid could talk, respond to him. It was sad. So we come back and still there. So this is when Ben says, everything costs something, Amy, but only you. A good quote. So Elliot walks down the stairs with Amy's 2 suitcases and she's like, I'm not leaving. She's like, I used to blame you for taking all this stuff away from me, for making me feel this way, blah, 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 blah. You should watch the movie and hear it all. She says, I don't blame you anymore. I allowed you to do those things to me. I'm not going to allow you to do that anymore. And Elliot's like, bleh, because he's awful. And then Henry speaks. And she's like, I taught him that. He taught me something too. He taught me I had value. Because when I came here, I was more handicapped than he. And then Elliot is like, Amy, you belong to me. She kind of shakes her head and says, I belong to myself. And then she and Henry walk up the stairs. And Elliot leaves her suitcase on the floor at the bottom of the stairs. And he leaves. And that's the end of the movie. It was so good. So Daniel gave it a 7.5. Punk Kid's motivations were unclear. He thought the football scenes were funny because they were really funny. They were good. I'm not normally into sports things, but it wasn't like super serious sports stuff. It was fun sports stuff. Mervyn dying made me really sad, and I don't like the Punk Kid. So give it a 9. But honestly, it's amazing. So you should watch Amy on Disney Plus if you haven't yet. I told you a lot of things, but I didn't tell you everything in these 30 minutes because the movie's over an hour. So you should watch it. Thank you for listening to me. If you made it through 33 minutes, I appreciate you. I appreciate you anyway. But thank you for watching. I'm Robin. I will see you tomorrow. Bye.